Hello again. Welcome back to year 4 of the Religious Education Initiative. This is week 28, day 1. So last time we saw David encounter Nabal, a wealthy and surly man, and lose his temper to the point that he was prepared to kill Nabal and all the men in his household. We saw David turn from this purpose by the wisdom, discretion, and decisive action of Nabal's wife Abigail, who brought gifts to David and his men. When she told her husband what she had done, he died in shock and rage, and David married her instead. We noted that this was not a good thing, even though Abigail is an excellent wife for David, because she is neither his first or second wife. This is the point where David begins to act more like a king of the Gentile nations than the anointed of Yahweh, the God of Israel. Nonetheless, David remains humble and faithful to God, as we will see in this week's reading. Not perfect, but humble and faithful. So, this is chapter 26, and we'll read into 27 as well. Then the Ziphites came to Saul at Gibeah, saying, David is in hiding on the hill of Hachilah, which is opposite Jeshimon. So Saul rose and went down to the wilderness of Ziph with 3,000 chosen men of Israel to seek David in the wilderness of Ziph. Saul encamped on the hill of Hachilah, which is opposite Jeshimon beside the road. But David remained in the wilderness. When he learned that Saul had come after him into the wilderness, David sent out spies and learned that Saul had indeed arrived. Then David set out and came to the place where Saul had encamped, and David saw the place where Saul lay, with Abner, son of Ner, the commander of his army. Saul was lying within the encampment, while the army was encamped around him. Then David said to Ahimelech the Hittite and to Joab's brother Abishai, son of Zeruiah, Who will go down with me into the camp to Saul? Abishai said, I will go down with you. So David and Abishai went to the army by night. There Saul lay sleeping within the encampment with his spear stuck in the ground at his head, and Abner and the army lay around him. Abishai said to David, God has given your enemy into your hand today. Now, therefore, let me pin him to the ground with one stroke of the spear. I will not strike him twice. But David said to Abishai, Do not destroy him, for who can raise his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? David said, As the Lord lives, the Lord will strike him down, or his day will come to die, or he will go down into battle and perish. The Lord forbid that I should raise my hand against the Lord's anointed. But now take the spear that is at his head and the water jar, and let us go. So David took the spear that was at Saul's head and the water jar, and they went away. No one saw it or knew it, nor did anyone wake, for they were all asleep, because a deep sleep from the Lord had fallen upon them. Then David went over to the other side and stood on top of a hill far away, with a great distance between them. David called to the army and to Abner, son of Ner, saying, Abner, will you not answer? Then Abner replied, Who are you that calls to the king? David said to Abner, Are you not a man? Who is like you in Israel? Why then have you not kept watch over your lord the king? For one of the people came in to destroy your lord the king. This thing that you have done is not good. As the Lord lives, you deserve to die, because you have not kept watch over your lord, the Lord's anointed. See now, where is the king's spear or the water jar that was at his head? Saul recognized David's voice and said, Is this your voice, my son David? David said, It is my voice, my lord, O king. And he added, Why does my lord pursue his servant? For what have I done? What guilt is on my hands? Now therefore let my lord the king hear the words of his servant. If it is the Lord who has stirred you up against me, may he accept an offering, but if it is mortals, may they be cursed before the Lord, for they have driven me out today from my share in the heritage of the Lord, saying, Go, serve other gods. Now therefore do not let my blood fall to the ground, away from the presence of the Lord, for the king of Israel has come out to seek a single flea, like one who hunts a partridge in the mountains. Then Saul said, I have done wrong. Come back, my son David, for I will never harm you again, because my life was precious in your sight today. I have been a fool and have made a great mistake. David replied, Here is the spear, O king. Let one of the young men come over and get it. The Lord rewards everyone for his righteousness and his faithfulness, for the Lord gave you into my hand today. But I would not raise my hand against the Lord's anointed. As your life was precious today in my sight, so may my life be precious in the sight of the Lord, and may he rescue me from all tribulation." Then Saul said to David, "Blessed be you, my son David. You will do many things and will succeed in them." So David went his way, and Saul returned to his place. David said in his heart, "I shall now perish one day by the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me than to escape to the land of the Philistines. Then Saul will despair of seeking me any longer within the borders of Israel, and I shall escape out of his hand." So David set out and went over, he and the 600 men who were with him, to King Achish, son of Maoch of Gath. David stayed with Achish at Gath, he and his troops, every man with his household, and David with his 2 wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail of Carmel, Nabal's widow. When Saul was told that David had fled to Gath, he no longer sought for him. Then David said to Achish, "If I have found favor in your sight, let a place be given me in one of the country towns, so that I may live there. For why should your servant live in the royal city with you?" So that day Achish gave him Ziklag. Therefore Ziklag has belonged to the kings of Judah to this day. The length of time that David lived in the country of the Philistines was 1 year and 4 months. Now David and his men went up and made raids on the Geshurites, the Girzites, and the Amalekites, for these were the landed settlements from Telam on the way to Shur and on to the land of Egypt. David struck the land, leaving neither man nor woman alive, but took away the sheep, the oxen, the donkeys, the camels, and the clothing, and came back to Achish. When Achish asked, "Against whom have you made a raid today?" David would say, "Against the Negev, the desert of Judah, or against the Negev of the Jerachmeelites, or against the Negev of the Kenites." David left neither man nor woman alive to be brought back to Gath, thinking, "They might tell about us and say, 'David has done so and so.'" Such was his practice all the time he lived in the country of the Philistines. Achish trusted David, thinking, "He has made himself utterly abhorrent to his people Israel. Therefore he shall always be my servant." Okay, so on the one hand, we posted along with this that's under the discussion questions a little bit from the Venerable Bede, Saint Bede of Jarrow, who talks about David and Saul and says David represents and signifies Christ and the church, those who strive for humility and innocence, and Saul signifies and represents those who persecute. And this is certainly the case. We see David here, again, he's not perfect. We've seen him make mistakes, not least, as we said last time, with beginning to marry multiple wives. This is a problem, and it's going to become worse. But David is still faithful to Saul, or rather, he's faithful to God. God has chosen and anointed Saul, and therefore David will not raise his hand against Saul. David knows he is anointed to be king, but he will not seize it with his own hands. So far, so good. In this, we see David is a man after God's own heart. And we see David, we see him remonstrating. We see him criticizing Abner, the general of King Saul, and with Saul himself. It's interesting, too, we see Saul say words that sound like repentance, saying, "I have done wrong. Please come back, David. I will never try to harm you again." But David is done with trusting. So he says, "No, send one of your young men to get the spear, and it can go back to you." And he says, "May the Lord reward me. May the Lord preserve me, because I have been faithful and righteous today." Right? And Saul blesses David, which is, I think, important, even though Saul is a broken and a troubled man. But really, this is a sad story. David does well in this, but there is no healing the relationship between him and Saul. Saul is too far gone. David, I think rightly, doesn't trust and can't trust Saul again. The problem is David doesn't seem to be trusting God either when he says, if I stay out here, Saul's going to catch up with me one of these days, even though David has been delivered in what really seems and is a miraculous way every time Saul has come to him. So now David leaves the land of Israel and goes to the Philistines. He fulfills his own prophecy. He says, they're driving me out today from my share in the heritage of the Lord, saying to go and serve other gods. And then he goes and he serves a king in the land of the Philistines who serves other gods. And he gets a city to live in. And again, we can say, oh, well, what else is David supposed to do? He's taking refuge with the Philistines because Saul's trying to kill him. But the Lord has taken care of David thus far. He's been very faithful. And I'm not sure, but I think we can and should read David as making a mistake here. Because he makes a mistake doesn't mean that God abandons him, but this isn't a good path, I think. He doesn't live there long, just a year and 4 months. And then it says that he goes and makes raids. Now, the people he's raiding, these are desert people, pagan people, raiding peoples themselves. So, on the one hand, they're peoples that would be attacking the Philistines and the Israelites, both. So, that's fair. That David is annihilating everyone, that's not how they're supposed to make war if we look at the guidelines that are given to Israel in the Torah, in the law, for how they are to go about warfare. Or if they are to annihilate everyone, this is only when God has placed a people under the ban. And when that happens, everything is destroyed. There is no booty that is to be taken. No sheep, no oxen, no donkeys, and all these things that David is taking, they're supposed to leave. So what David is doing here, it's justifiable, we can say, in human terms, but this is not what they're supposed to be doing. And then David lies to the king of Gath, to Achish. He tells him that he's making war against Israel, against Judah, against some of the tribes that are associated with or part of the nation of Israel, so that Achish will think, oh, well, he's made his own people his enemies. They hate him now. He'll stay with me forever. But again, what David is doing, it's tempting to say what David is doing here is continuing and completing the conquest of Canaan that was left undone, and in a sense, maybe, but that he's taking booty, that he's taking loot. This is not what was supposed to be done. So this is something of a troubled passage. It's not what we'd like to see. It's not, everything isn't wrong here, but not everything is right either. So anyway, that's it for day 1 here. God bless you all. And we'll see you again another day for the day 2 readings.